Greetings and welcome to Aspects of Aliyah, and today we're going to start on our series concerning prophets, prophecy and the Jewish people. So before we begin on our expedition, let us take a primary consideration, because when we speak about prophecy, effectually we are speaking about how God communicates with mankind in the sensible world. So, an area affecting prophecy that has possibly not received the attention that it deserves is the via media of God appearing or speaking to mankind. So I'm going to suggest, with a scriptural remit, we need to consider visions, dreams, and even visitations of post-mortem identities. 3 means of communication. Now, the records and traditions of both categories roughly fall into these categories, and I don't want to over-intellectualize these things, and I don't want to deluge you with scriptures, so I will make it as straightforward as I possibly can. So the first category, if we're going to use the posh word, is theophanies. Theophany. That is an appearance of God in simplest terms. At one time, the term theophany was an all-encompassing term for revelation of the divine in this sensible word. So there's been a lot of intellectual discussion about the reality of these things. Did these things really happen, or were they just in the imagination, or is there a particular dimension that is not open to everybody? So there have been all kinds of different suggestions of different words and different designations, but for our purposes we'll just take this term very simply as when God appears to man, either individually or corporately. So, in my opinion, the religious historian Frederik Bradshaw-Wright tried many times to redefine these things, but made what I think is a fairly seminal comment. The manifestation of the sacred, ontologically, is the foundation of the world. So what's he saying there? When God appears, we understand what's going on in the world. And if we follow these things, then all things need to imitate or conform to the things that God told us to do. Very complicated, very long-winded, but basically that is a good definition. So it's a very seminal book, The Sacred and the Profane. Actually picks up on the work of an earlier theologian, Rudolf Otto, who some of you may be acquainted with. He's a Lutheran theologian in the interwar periods, and he wrote a short but very seminal work entitled The Idea of the Holy, and he coined various Latin phases and phrases in development of language to try and describe these things. Now, it could be said that human language is insufficient to describe the manifestation of God. Now, the reason I'm saying this is, if we try and describe God, we really are only describing a man, a superman, a spiritual man. But as far as we understand personality or identity, we're only really describing a man in our own image, or a consideration of our own image. So Rudolf Otto was trying to say that it was a mystery, it was fascinating. I won't bother with all Latin phrases and things that he used to try and describe this, but basically Otto was basically saying that we need to away with the old term epiphany, sort of God and angels and all sort of beautiful, airy-fairy things appear. It's not like that at all. God breaks through. He breaks through into the sensible world, and he appears physically, or speaks, or communicates in a way that can be understood. So therefore, a theophany, strictly speaking, is a manifestation of God. It's tangible to human senses on occasion, not always in human form. Also, God appears in what are known as Christophanies, which are pre-incarnate appearances of Messiah, which is questionable. This depends a lot on allegorical and typological interpretation of Scripture, but we'll just leave that until some later discussions. So, theophany, appearance of God; Christophany, appearance of Jesus before his existence in the sensible world, or afterwards upon his resurrection, or also angelophanies, appearances of angels, and sometimes all these put together under a single banner. Now, these groupings can cause a great deal of confusion, as some of them depend on various theories, as I said, of allegorically and typology. So how does God appear to you? In my forthcoming book, Towards the Theology of Israel, I look at this in extreme detail, with a multitude of scriptures. But briefly, I think I'd just like to say this for these next series. Now, I do really hope you'll follow this series. I'm really excited about it personally, and I'd love to hear from you. I've heard from a few people here and there, and you seem to like some of the things we've done before, and I've noticed that the general audience are very interested in the here and now, and what's happening now, and what the biblical basis of it is, along with understanding the history that goes behind the Aliyah, the Kingdom of God, Messiah, etc. So, very simply, how does God appear to us? How does he appear to us? If God appears to us, as I said earlier, it has to be in a way that we understand, a way that we comprehend, and a way that we can relate and maybe even communicate from that point. So, what I'm going to say is, there are what we might call general theophanies, where God appears, but not necessarily in a human sort of manifestation, or something that is immediately tangible, like a man. I'll just put it like this way. Very simply, somebody comes up to you in church or in the road, yeah, you recognise their power and the communication takes place. But God speaks to us in many and diverse ways, doesn't he? You know, writer Hebrews encapsulated this beautifully, didn't they? Where he says that in many and diverse ways God spoke to us. In these days, or the latter days, he spoke to us through his Son. However, the way God appeared, biblically, in times gone by, where he didn't appear, or his face didn't appear, and this is reasonable, because the scriptures tell us time and time again, nobody sees God and lives. So God has chosen to reveal himself in many ways, through storms, thunder and lightning, many occasions of this. Psalm 187:15 being a good one. We could also look at Exodus 19:16, 20:18. We can look at Job 37:5. Again in the Psalms 29 through 9. Psalm 77:18, Psalm 97:4. Goes to the prophets, Isaiah 30:27 through 33. Amos in the opening chapter, Habakkuk in the 3rd chapter, Zechariah in the 9th chapter, and of course Revelation in the 11th chapter. So God speaks to us in the storm. Yeah? He also speaks through earthquakes, doesn't he? And volcanic eruptions. Exodus 19:18 and Isaiah 30:33 tell us that God reveals himself through volcanic phenomena, through earthquakes. In Isaiah 29, verses 5 through 6. Slightly earlier, Judges 5, verses 4 and 5. In the Psalm 77:18. In Habakkuk chapter 3, verse 6. And he also speaks to us through fiery manifestations. These are my favourite ones, just by the way. Exodus 3:2 and 13:21 and 19:18 and 24:17. Leviticus 9:24, Numbers 14:14, Deuteronomy 4:11 through 12, 5, Judges 13:20-22, Psalm again 97:3, and particularly Yoel 2 through 30. He speaks in cloudy manifestations. Business cloud, Exodus 16:10. Previously in 13:21. This is contextually. Again, in Exodus 19:9, 24:15 through 16. Exodus 33:9, 34:5, Deuteronomy 31:15, Leviticus 16:2, Numbers 9:15 through 22, 14:14. In Kings, when we look at the monarchy and things like this, 8 through 11, Ezekiel, the book of Ezekiel opens with a cloudy manifestation. In the New Testament, Matthew 17:5, Mark 9:7, Luke 9:34-35, and again, Revelation 4:14 through 6. So God speaks. Let's just bring a composite on this. I just love this. Through the earthquake, wind and fire, God spoke in a still, small voice of calm. Don't you just love the hymn? Oh, beautiful, isn't it? Through the earthquake, wind and fire, God speaks to us. So let's look at angel offerings. These are particularly interesting in my opinion, because we've got what you might call ordinary angels. We've also got this phenomenal character known as the angel of the Lord. And the angel of the Lord, interestingly, is the only angel that speaks in the first person, beginning in Genesis 16:10. And the human who's addressed, basically in this one on 16:13, attributes the experience of the angel of the Lord to God directly. People hold an extremely high Christology like to believe that that was a pre-incarnate visitation of Messiah. However, this idea doesn't stand, as the character is actually addressed as malach, translated angel, or a messenger. And this application of messenger is general throughout Tanakh. Genesis 19, verse 1, and also verses 21, 31:11, 31:13. Similarly, in Exodus 3:2 and 3:4, in Judges 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, 6, 7, 8, 9, and in Zechariah, importantly, in 3:1 and 12:8. I don't want to deluge you with scriptures. I just really make the point that God speaks to us through his messengers. Yeah? Who speak in the name of the angel ruler. But the thing that's important is that Moshiach, Messiah himself, in one sense, is a servant with almost messenger. The thing to remember is that an angel is also a Eved, a messenger of the Lord who carries the same quantitative authority. Now, Eved, like in the suffering servant Eved Yahweh, refers to the practice of a sovereign sending his main representative, generally wearing a chain of office that denoted his right to speak with the same authority. So we'll take a break there, and we'll come back to you shortly.
If you are a Christian, then there is no question that you owe a great debt to the Jewish people. Unto them were entrusted the oracles of God. What does that mean? It means, if not for the faithfulness of the Jewish people, we would not have this. And therefore you would not know your God, and you would not know his Son.
Israel and the Jewish people are under attack right now, and we owe them everything. The least that we can do is support them in their hour of need. So please go to EzraInternational.org and give to the Emergency Relief Fund, and your dollars will be used to help displaced and traumatized Jewish people throughout the land.
And remember, if you do nothing, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jewish people from another place. Yet who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. Please go to EzraInternational.org and give your best gift today.
Welcome back. So we've spoken about these various ways that God speaks to us, and I could spend the next 3 or 4 weeks speaking to you about all these things. I just love the way that the prophets speak and the scriptures speak about the Lord visits us. Just little examples such as, I just love this, the Lord came down. The Lord came down. Genesis 11:5, Exodus 34:5, Numbers 11:25. Although the most common verb for a manifestation of the glory of the Lord is appeared. The Lord appeared in Leviticus 9:23, Numbers 14:10, 16:19, likewise 42 and 26. God's glory, and this is one I like, sometimes known as Shekinah incorrectly because Shekinah is not a biblical term. It's a word we use today, but Shekinah is not a biblical term. Although we do use it today, and it doesn't bother me particularly. But in this occasion, in Exodus 24:16, it's important to know that God settled on Mount Sinai. So that's visitations. The next one is visions, which really brings us to prophecy proper. Now, there are 3 ranks in the way that God reveals himself to us. Firstly, directly, or to use this technical term, theophany, or as the angel of the Lord, or via, or third-party wise, by ordinary angels. So visions. Now, in Judaism, visions are considered to be superior to dreams. Now, the list of visions in the Tanakh is vast. I don't want to overdo this, simply say that it's vast. So a vision is a mode of revelation, and we can give some examples roughly by just looking at the following. Firstly, warnings, Jeremiah 1 and 13. And one of the main tasks of prophecy is to give a warning. Secondly, future events. Ezekiel 26 and 27. Daniel 7, 9 and 10. So one of the primary works of the prophets through visions is to present warnings. And let's remember, I think I'll bring this in here, prophecies generally, predictive prophecies, which warnings are of course, are conditional. And a prophecy generally is, if you do this, I will do that. Or, if you do that, I will do this. Positive, negative. Let's leave it there. Secondly, to help us understand God's counsel, we have my second category, heavenly activities. 1 Kings 22, Zechariah 3:2, where the prophet sees the heavenly tribunal. If I had more time, I'd like to talk about 3:2 a little bit more. It's almost in a sense like the opening part of Job, where the accuser, Hasatan, the accuser, appears. And God says to him, where have you been? In Job, I've been walking up and down the earth, literally see what I can pick up, see what I can find fault with, who I can accuse. But in Zechariah, it's a wonderful thing where you've got the priest standing there in his dirty clothes, being accused by the accuser, Hasatanas, the devil, if you want. And then, it's wonderful. And then, the defence, if you like, the angel Lord, or however you want to say that character appears, is this sort of branch snatched from the fire. A wonderful piece of information, but that gives the real view. Zechariah saw this vision about God's justice. He saw what the heavenly tribunal was. So, we could expand this grossly. I just want to reiterate things because this is the basis of everything that we are going to talk about as we go along. The first consideration of prophecy, warnings, both for the present and for the future. Rebel against God, this will be the consequence. Obey God, this will be the blessing. Very plain, very simple, many examples. Heavenly activities to show us that God's justice is exactly what he says that it is. Now then, possibly one of the bigger elements of this is what I've termed receiving information. Many examples, but I'm going to look at Eliphaz, a friend of Job in Job 4, Abraham in Genesis 15, Jacob in Genesis 46, and interestingly enough, the false prophet Balaam in Numbers 24, Micaiah in 1 Kings 22, Samuel, who became a prophet as a child in 1 Samuel 3. And also, Nathan, the prophet, was told not only that King David's throne will be established forever, but also that David's son, Solomon, would build a temple for God in Jerusalem in 2 Samuel 7. Now, as time goes by, with God willing, we'll look at how a lot of these things were transmitted by the prophets to Israel, and if they'd understood and behaved, I hate to use that term, if they'd obeyed God, things would have been vastly different. But as ever, mankind follows his own predilections, and sadly, divine history becomes debased by human activity. So, our third category is, I'm going to use its very posh name, oniriology. Really? What's that? Dreams. Okay. So, the average person is considered to spend more than a third of their lifetime sleeping. Well, I wish that was true. I don't know how it goes for you. If I do 4 or 5 hours, I think I've done really well. The fact that my dogs wake me up in the middle of the night, I'm not going to include that, because normally they're waking up when I go to bed. However, personally, 4 or 5 hours is good for me, but medically you're supposed to do 8. And apparently, a lot of people do that as people get older. Some do more, some do less. However, our conversation is theological, not sleep therapy. So we're looking at neurology, dreams. So, a third of your life you spend in dreams. Now, during sleep, the only form of human perception is in dreams that are experienced by everybody. Isn't that interesting? Human perception is experienced by everybody. Dreams, psychologists tell us, and I think it might be right, are considered to be a third state of human existence. Now, that's a little bit arbitrary, isn't it? Because you're supposed to sleep for 8 out of 24 hours. I know some people who seem to me to be asleep most of their life, but we won't go there. And a lot of people don't seem to spend an awful lot of time in what I'm going to call active mental activity. I'm not going to go into that because it's outside of our conversation, although it does fall into this in a much wider sense, which is discussed at some length in my forthcoming 1-volume book, Towards a Theology of Israel, which for those of you brave enough will be over 2,000 pages, and you have to be fairly strong to be able to lift it. Anyway, that's beside the point. But when I was doing this major work, it really came to me the importance of our ostensibly non-conscious activities. So, very quickly, dreams are defined as images, emotions, ideas and sensations that involuntarily occur during REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, which is a very small part of sleeping. The contents of dreams may be mysterious, confused, enlightening, or simply continuation of the day's thought or latent hopes, desires and ambitions. I think that's a very good thing. Dreams may also be a vehicle of divine communication. And I've got to say, in my life, in relation to the Lord has spoken to me, as I understand it, in this way many times. So, neurology has not really received the attention it deserves in mainstream theology, outside the eschatological prophecy by Yoel in Joel 2:28, reiterated by Peter on the day of Pentecost in Acts 2:16 through 21. So, very quickly, in Judaism, dreams are considered to comprise 60% of prophecy. Goodness me! Whereas Ecclesiastes 3 seems to imply that dreams are a continuation of awakened consciousness, the importance of dreams within the prophetic corpus is considered of great value. Now, it seems that there was a distinction in Tanakh in what was to be ordinary dreams without any prophetic significance, and others that did contain portents. Now, maybe where some things went slightly adrift is some significant dreams required in the interpretive skills by one recognised as having the gift. Dreams that contained a plain and direct message from a divine being, God, angels, Christological things, were considered not to need interpretation, but in both cases, the recipients were considered to be prophets or messengers of the divine. Whereas two distinctions are observable in the Tanakh, this does not seem really to be in a place for dreams that we consider to be ordinary dreams. It may be the case that even there may be tension on this. and the following prohibitions were considered to apply. There must not be found among you anyone who makes his son or daughter pass through the fire, or a fortune teller, soothsayer, omen reader, sorcerer, one who casts spells, a medium, a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For who does these things is an abomination before God. And because of these things, the Lord is driving them out before you. So, we're going to finish there, and in our next session, we're going to pick up on dreams again, and then we'll look at some other things. Then in our session 3, we'll move on to the prophets. Both writing prophets and non-writing prophets, and both male and female prophets. I hope you're excited about this as I am, as we move on to our next few weeks. But in the meantime, as ever, God be with you until we meet again.